Welcome back to Beholder to No One, a D&D podcast. Today I'm here with Jeremy from Three Black Halflings. Hello.
Hello.
We're just going to talk about one of our favorite pastimes, D&D and tabletop games today.
It's a moderate interest, mild interest for both of us.
Mild.
It's kind of. I've played it a couple times. It's all right.
I played it a handful of times a week. It's fine.
Yeah. Yes, I played it a few times in the last day.
Exactly.
I actually DM'd a session this morning. I have been GMing all day because I DM'd a session of Dungeons and Dragons this morning that lasted like 4 hours, and then I had like a 30-minute break, and then I have a job where I work for this online escape room called Agent Venture. So, and I'm the GM. So it's basically the same premise, except it only lasts an hour and a half. But then I just GM'd 2 games of that. So I've done a full 7 hours of GMing today. And so here we are.
Life goals, I guess. Is it everything you dreamed about if you working full-time GM?
I don't know. I never dreamed of it. I never even thought it was possible.
That's fair.
Yeah, I started playing D&D, I think October 29th. It was either October 29th or October 30th of 2018 was the very first time that I had ever played D&D. I'd known of the game for many, many years, but because of where I lived, I just never had any opportunities really to play.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until then that I actually had somebody come up and be like, "Hey man, you want to play D&D?" And I was like, "Sure." And he'd never played either. So we were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And he got a group together, and he got a dude who knew how to DM, and we DM'd this little one shot. I played a deep gnome named Greeble Longpike.
Very nice.
And it was a blast. I was a druid. I was a level 1 druid, and yeah, great times. And I never looked back after that.
I actually don't remember the first character I've ever made. I do remember approximately when I started playing, but it was like 18 years ago.
Oh, dang.
I think that's how many.
You've been playing this game like 9 times longer than me.
Yeah. So what's funny is like a lot of people who've been playing that long, they become very, not a lot of people, but it's common enough that you notice it. They're like elitist almost, like my game's better than your game. And I never understood that because I'm just like, I've been playing, like a lot of people who've been playing for 6 years, like, I know everything about D&D. I've been playing longer than, like, I've been playing 6 times longer than you. What are you talking about? But like, I don't really care. It's like, it's just fun to play. Yeah. Why does it have to be a certain way?
The whole point of it even like says in the, what is it? Is it the player's handbook or the dungeon master's guide, or where it says, I think it's the DM's guide. Probably both, where it's like, look, these are rules, but at the end of the day, you guys can change it because the goal is for you guys to have a good time. This is just a framework to facilitate your fun. And if you would have more fun doing this differently, then you should go do that.
Exactly.
I actually have played in one game that was run by a DM who had been playing either since the early 90s or like the late 80s. This dude had been around a long time.
So and he's been playing my literal entire life.
Yeah, he was like, but he was fully set in his ways. Like, it was like, he was that dude who was like, I know how D&D is supposed to be played. Like, I never told him that I was on a D&D podcast, but I think someone had once mentioned to him that they had listened to D&D podcasts because they were wanting to start DMing. And they were like, I've been listening to D&D podcasts, for examples. And he was like, ugh, every D&D podcast sucks. Those people don't know how to play. It's just like, oh no. And yeah, I will say that is the only game I've ever played, D&D game that I've ever played that I actually quit. I
have quit a couple. I've been in literally like probably 4 or 5 dozen games. I don't know. I don't know how many games I've been in. But I did a lot of text-based RPG games where we did like text to post in forums or on Discord and stuff like that. So I played a lot more because of that, and they were all very small games.
Mm.
Eventually, I left that because I just ran out of time. I'm like, I am so busy. I'm sorry. I forgot to check. It's like they're waiting for me for like 2 weeks for a response, and it was just so slow.
Actually, from while I was playing that game, I learned that apparently it was possible in like the first edition. I think it was, well, I guess even in advanced D&D, it was possible to roll, I think, a 1 for your HP
Mm-hmm.
as a wizard. I think specifically like if you were a wizard. I forget how, but it was possible to just get a 1 because I think you still had to roll for HP at level 1. So you could start with 1 HP
That sounds
and you
horrible.
could just immediately die if you got hit.
That sounds absolutely horrible. You take 2 damage. Oh, I'm dead.
The game was a lot more of a meat grinder.
Yeah. I've played AD&D on the text-based form before, and I was so confused the entire time. I loved my character. She was fun. She was a female dwarf who was part of a female dwarf-only class where they were the guards and protectors of the town,
Okay.
which I loved that concept. I was like, cool, kick-ass women, awesome, let's do this.
Yeah.
I was so confused, though. Every single roll was like, what am I rolling? What am I trying to beat? I'm trying to beat below a 3? I'm confused. How do I beat... Why is my AC 3?
What?
Because their AC is backwards. The closer to 0 you are, the better your AC. So having an AC of 3 was like equivalent to plate armor. And I was just so lost.
Yeah, that seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, there was like a THACO score or something like that. And I'm just like,
Oh, I've heard about
what
this.
is this? What's
Yeah.
happening? What am I rolling? Just tell me what to roll and I'll role play it out. It'll be fine.
What would you say, like, not necessarily specific rules, but in terms of the overall feel and maybe even the point of the game, what would you say is the biggest difference for you between like second edition and something like 5e?
5e I found is a little bit easier to comprehend. From a newbie perspective, I caught on to 5th edition significantly faster than I did even with 3.5, which were the 2 I played the most. When I did play AD&D, I might have played 2nd edition. I don't know. But when I did play AD&D specifically...
Is AD&D the same thing as second edition, or is my
I
brain
don't
just
know.
mixing stuff up?
It might be.
I thought that AD&D was the second edition, but maybe I'm wrong.
Google, tell me the answer. AD&D versus 2nd edition. Nope, it looks like it's different.
on,
There's
Google.
AD&D 1st edition, AD&D 2nd edition.
Oh, okay.
And then
never mind then.
so maybe it's just
I
like
sit
1st
corrected.
and 2nd, and they're both AD&D, and there's just maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe AD&D. I think because I remember AD&D having something to do with like Gary Gygax's slightly different rules or something. I think the idea was that the rules were deeper for that version and more complex. If I read something about this a long time ago.
I am not sure. So let's see. There's OD&D was the original, then OD&D plus Greyhawk supplement, then the Holmes edition, then AD&D 1st edition plus Unearthed Arcana, AD&D 2nd edition, AD&D 2nd edition. Okay, so there is we're both technically right. So there's an AD&D 1st edition and 2nd edition, which are just the D&D 1st and 2nd edition. So and then it went to 3rd edition, 3.5, 4th, 5th. The more you know.
Yeah. Which version would you say is your favorite to have played so far?
5th edition, because I know it the best. Followed with Pathfinder more than 3.5.
Okay. Pathfinder is essentially like a recreated version of 3.5 with some slight changes, right?
Yes, they basically, it's like equivalent to 3.75 because they took 3.5 and just took all the things they didn't like about it and fixed the things they wanted.
Okay, and this was a direct reaction to the pretty drastic changes that accompanied 4th edition.
I don't know anything about 4th edition, to be honest. Like, I didn't even know there was a 4th edition until, like, I started playing 5th edition because I completely skipped that one.
Yeah. I started playing, technically, I think the very first version of D&D that I ever played was Pathfinder. And I didn't know it, but the guy who ran the game for us told us that I don't think he had ever played 5th edition, but he played Pathfinder and he played 3rd edition, and I think he had maybe played 4th edition but didn't like it. From what I understand about 4th edition is that now every single class could get spells, I think. And then it was also designed in such a way that it didn't function properly unless you had minis and a board.
The one thing I heard about 4th edition was it was like very video game-esque. And it was supposed to like bring in, from what I understand, the concept was to like bring in more players. It was like, oh, you like video games? We made a tabletop game just like all the video games you play. Perfect. And like a lot of the video gamers that went to D&D for 4th edition seemed to like it, but then the people who've played D&D previously are like, eh.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember hearing that even so in 3rd edition, or excuse me, in 5th edition, distances are described in terms of feet. I believe in 4th edition they're described in terms of squares.
Interesting. That could make sense too.
So it's very much designed around minis.
That's weird. I think I was gonna make a 4th edition character one time, and I got severely overwhelmed in the first 30 minutes. And then I'm like, are we playing 4th edition? They're like, oh no, we changed it to 5th edition because you said that you never played and weren't comfortable learning to play it. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
Whew, worked out.
I was like, I'm so confused.
Yeah. What would you say was the thing that was so overwhelming about trying to create a character in 4th edition?
It was just like, I was looking it up, and so they have something similar to with video games where they have like a tank, DPS, and heals, but they like tried to do that from what I could gather in the game, and you had like certain roles you had to fill, and then I'm like, okay, well, what is everybody else's roles? I don't want to learn. Okay, so defender, striker, controller, leader, those are your 4 roles, and I'm like, what the fuck is a role? What are all these like what are all these other things that are in here? Like, okay, the classes are in these particular roles, cool, you can only have one of each, but I don't know what to look at because I don't know what you guys are playing. And then it was just like more detail oriented towards that, which I'm sure some people were like, oh, this is wonderful, but I'm like, I'm so confused, what are you playing? And then nobody was answering me, so I'm like, I don't even want to look at it yet.
I feel like 5th edition's relative looseness has served it well in contrast to something like 4th edition, based on your description. I think that the accessibility of 5th edition, I mean, it's been said umpteen times, but the accessibility of 5th edition, coupled with the advent of shows like Critical Role and Stranger Things, weirdly, Stranger Things never made me want to play D&D, but apparently it made a bunch of other people want to play D&D, has massively boosted the fan base.
Which I think is awesome. I can, like, honestly, just from having played in 2003 to when I started, it went from like the first store I ever played in was smaller than my office is now. Like, it was such a tiny little store with like one table and very minimal anything. And then now if I go back to that same store, they have expanded to bigger than my apartment, if not bigger, in 2 floors. And I'm just like, Jesus. Magic also has a big pool in that too, but like it's just got really, really big, and I love being able to like go to the bookstore and seeing all these different role play games. Though I would wish that they sit on more than just D&D, but they have a lot more.
I haven't played that many other role play games.
Oh, I love all of them.
Role-playing games.
There's so many good tabletop games.
I recently played Wanderhome for the first time.
I want to play that so bad.
It is extraordinarily wholesome.
I want to try it.
It is. I will say this. It is very, very cute. If you actually want to try it, you should join the TBH Discord, because that was how I played it. We have a page where people can set up games and play various games, and we played a game of Wanderhome. I can't remember what my character was, but I herded bumblebees. I was a shepherd of bumblebees.
That's amazing. I love it. One of the biggest reasons why I decided to make Beholder to one shot on top of the discussions because I wanted to play other games. Like I've talked about this before, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, people. But like I loved Shadowrun. I played that and it was such a fun game. I played Mech Warrior and that was fun. I've played GURPS, which was confusing as fuck, but interesting because I got to play an octopus engineer, which is just like, okay.
Were you an octopus who was engineering, or were you engineering octopi?
I was an octopus alien that was engineering.
Were you engineering other octopuses?
No, but I was trying to save the octopi in the aquarium in that game, I think.
That sounds like a really fun time.
Yes. He's like, you could be whatever you want. I'm like, anything? Can I be an octopus? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, Really?
Are there specific stats that you would have associated with an octopus?
He helped me figure all that out because I think you could make your own race and stuff in the book.
Oh, wow.
So, like, I didn't know how to play the game at all going in. I was just like, this is what I want to do. And he's like, okay, here's how you do it. I also played in another game, also GURPS, run by the same person. I played a ferret.
Whoa.
That was like, but we were all like humanoid-esque where we could like use weapons and stuff like that.
Oh, like Redwall.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
like Redwall. So I played a ferret and I was very roguey and it was a lot of fun. And I was like, I go super stealth.
Nice. I wish that this is a slight tangent, but speaking of Redwall, I wish that the ferrets were good guys. Like
Yes.
one thing that bugged me about that series was that some of the coolest animals were just automatically evil.
My best friend is so mad that rats are evil because she loves rats.
Oh, like Clooney the Scourge out here, evil rat. They're really smart. Rats are great.
Yes. She is such a fan. She's like, I just want to play a rat and they're evil. I'm like, I'm sorry. Maybe we can make them not evil in the game. But if we played Redwall, she would be DMing and then she wouldn't get to play a rat anyway.
Well, but the good news is she could include a bunch of good rat NPCs.
That is fair. Like in your world.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's the same issue that D&D has.
Yes.
Where it makes I understand where it came from. We've done episodes about this. I feel like a lot of this descends from the kind of the Lord of the Rings series, which I think is the major inspiration for most of certainly the high fantasy that has followed it. And in Lord of the Rings, they kind of had the excuse of the orcs being magically created to be evil, but there's some very unfortunate racial coding with the orcs that even Tolkien acknowledged at one point, saying that they were based on basically Asians. I think the phrase that he uses the phrase he used was that least attractive Mongol type. But like the orcs in the original series are like short, they have yellowish skin, and I think something about slanty eyes or slitted eyes or something. So they're coded Asian. But even if J.R.R. Tolkien was not trying to make some grand point about Asians being evil, because I think very few people would think that he actually was. I think the idea is that anything you create will necessarily draw from your own experiences and your own way of viewing the world. And this is a dude who was born before the poem The White Man's Burden was published. He was born during European colonialism, back when the sun never set on the British Empire. Like that stuff would be baked into the way that he was raised. And so I think that when people start drawing inspiration from him, not that you shouldn't draw any inspiration from him, but I think especially when people were not necessarily critical of some of the, I hate the word problematic because I feel like it's just been overused, but some of the more, let's say, racially unfortunate aspects of his work, you end up with stuff where it's similar to D&D, where there's a big push within D&D now to eliminate the idea of evil races. But tying back to Redwall, it's the same kind of thing. Now, obviously, to my memory, none of the evil animal groups in Redwall are coded in a way that resembles real world cultures. Unlike D&D, where there are clear parallels that can be drawn to various real world cultures with some of the evil groups, but I feel like you make for a more interesting story, I think, when you give people the opportunity to actually make choices.
That makes complete sense. I actually loved playing the opposite of what characters were, quote, supposed to be in the books. Like, I remember there was one game that I played where I played a drow, and drows in the book were supposed to be like, I don't remember like the description I read, but it was like gloomy and like darker and like almost angsty vibe. And I went with the perkiest damn drow I could ever be, which is very strange for me to be super perky, but I was just like this happy-go-lucky, everything is great. I can't believe that we're alive today and this is wonderful and let's go pick flowers and go frolicking. And then my best friend played a gnome who are stereotypically supposed to be these very happy-go-lucky, optimistic group and played like an emo gnome.
Ha!
And it was just the funniest shit to us because we were like, this is fantastic because we're just fuck what the norms are or what the book says. Like, I just want to play this, or I want to play an intelligent, knowledge-based cleric that's a half-orc. Like, I'm gonna play whatever the fuck I want. I don't care what the book says. So I never actually, personally at least, use the book for the descriptions of what the races were supposed to be like. I was just like, oh, that looks like it would be fun to play. Pick that one. And like I just pick the race based off pure picture and like statistics on it and then go from there. But then I realized that other people were like when I started to realize that about the lore more recently, sadly, but I'm like, wait, what? And I started reading, I'm like, oh, shit. I never even thought about it that way.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I think if you're not in a position where you see, well, like if you are not yourself, like for instance, a racial minority who sees the way that various minorities have been depicted in Western culture throughout time, essentially, and it's not something that directly affects you, I think it's a very easy thing to miss because at no point, like have you ever seen Bright?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's a Netflix movie that came out a couple years ago. It's not a good movie at all, but they're in it. It's a fantasy movie. It's like an urban fantasy movie where all of the black people, or no, not all of the black people, but all of the orcs are basically just black people. Like very like to the point where like they dress like black people and they all listen to hip hop and like they like it's not they don't D&D doesn't do anything like that. Where it's just like, we are very clearly using this group as a stand-in for this very specific group of black, like where in Bright, it's black Americans living in like LA. Bright, not a good film. Not a good film. But yeah, D&D doesn't do that. But there are implicit wordings that I think are uncomfortably similar to other wordings that you might hear from like 100 years ago describing actual people.
Yeah, I've become more aware of them over the last year since I started the podcast, especially with being on Twitter more and socializing and wanting to or becoming interested in more shows that have people who are dealing with those things. And then I'm like at first and I was just like, oh, okay, here's a perfect example. And I felt really stupid saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Go for it.
So Rivals of Waterdeep it's a fantastic show. I hadn't watched it before this point. And somebody posted a comment that was posted about being compared to orcs. Why would I watch a show about a group of orcs? And my naive thought, because I didn't realize the comparison at the time, was the show was about a party of literal orc characters. That's what I thought. So I was like, well, if they don't like orcs, then why would they watch a show about orcs? Like that was my thought process. And then it was pointed out to me what it actually was meant, what they were meaning. And I'm like, oh, fuck. What the fuck is wrong with this person? Like suddenly I'm like, really?
Oh, were they using orc as like a euphemism for like a racial group?
Yes.
Oh man.
And so I hadn't seen the show before that point, so I just assumed that's what it was about. Like there was a literal party of orc character races going around being the rivals of Waterdeep, and I'm like, that's a really cool concept. And then I was like, oh, that's not what you meant. Oh
wow.
Oh, you're just an asshole. Okay, now I understand. And thankfully, like I actually said something on there like about, oh, that's really stupid. Why would they watch it if they didn't like orc races or something in the game? And then someone pointed out to me politely, like, no, that's not what I meant. This is what they meant. And I'm like, oh fuck.
Oh man.
I'm like, I'm so sorry. That was more my naivety and not having seen the show. But now I know that. And I like when I see those kinds of things, I report them. And I'm like, I'll say something instead of just not knowing. But I would have never known that prior to, because I play in groups that don't say shit like that because they're not assholes.
Yeah. I feel like it's also important to recognize like the groups that you play in, the vast majority of people who play this game are not a bunch of like racist jerks.
Exactly. So it was kind of eye-opening and I'm just like, well, what the fuck? Like, why you gotta don't ruin D&D. Like, go away. Go find another hobby, please.
You know, it's interesting. As Three Black Halflings gets a little bit more profile, we have started to encounter our first hate comments. Specifically on, we were interviewed by the Dragon Talk Wizards of the Coast podcast.
That was such a good episode, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That was a blast to do.
Mm-hmm.
Shelly and Greg are awesome. But there were a couple of comments on the YouTube page where one of them was like, it was like, why does it have to be 3 black halflings?
Oh, I think I remember you seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another person was like, what? So are we allowed to have 3 white halflings now, or is that not allowed? And what's really funny is that we explain in the episode that the reason that we call our show 3 Black Halflings was because on the show, I'm one of the 3 Black Halflings, for those of you who haven't heard us. The other 2 Black Halflings are named Unati and Jasper. And Jasper had put he was going to DM his first ever game. And I was like, cool, I want to play a halfling monk, and I want him to be a black halfling. And I was coming up with all these ideas because, I'm black, so why not make a black character?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking up art and this wasn't actually last year. This was in the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, this was the fall of 2019. So I did like this deep Google search dive trying to find a picture of like a black halfling monk, that could match my image of my character that I'm like, yeah, and it could give me more ideas and be inspiring. And I found one picture of a black halfling in all of like my hours of searching. The only black halfling I saw was like an obscure halfling subrace that I don't know what edition it existed in, but it doesn't exist in 5th edition. It exists on like another planet or like another plane of existence. And it's like a single blurry image of a couple of black halflings. And other than that, I could not find, there was no fan art. There was no official art. Since then, I would be remiss if I did not say, since then, in a number of books, there have now been black halflings represented, and now there's a lot more black halfling art. Still not a lot total, but a lot more than there used to be.
Right.
But at the time, I was like, this is insane. And I went to Jasper, like, why are there no black halflings here?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where the show kind of came from. Eventually, when we decided to create a podcast, we were like, what should we call it? And we're like, oh yeah, Black Halflings, huh? Because we don't know of very many D&D podcasts where people just kind of talk and all of the people, like, talk podcasts where all the people are black.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's emphasize that.
That's fair. And it's kind of neat that it like comes from something that you experienced, and then you like wanted to see that change, and now you're helping make the change. Because I remember when I listened to one of your episodes, I don't remember if it was the Dragon Talk or one of your actual episodes, where you were mentioning that you went and did a search again, like you were looking for a podcast with black or people of color running it.
Mm-hmm.
And now you guys are like the 5th one or something like that on the search. And like the first time it was Terry Crews when he was on Critical Role.
Yep. Jasper pointed that out. That I think Jasper was the one who originally did the search on YouTube. I think he typed in black D&D.
Okay.
I think the only result was Terry Crews.
Yeah. That always like astonished me, and I didn't even think about it really until like I saw a post or something. It's like, how many people of color podcasts are you following? I'm like, I honestly don't know, because I don't, like, most podcasts don't have it explicitly stated somewhere. So I just was like, how many am I following? And I like went and tried to look, and every single one I clicked on was just like, oh, well, everybody's white. Like every single one. And I'm like, huh, I never even thought about that. Like I just clicked on it, and like I interact with a profile picture that's usually an icon of some sort. Like my icon's of a holder. Like I've posted my picture personally, but so people know that I'm white, but most people don't post pictures all the time or explicitly state, so I never even think about it. I'm just like, it's probably diverse. And then it's like, oh, well, nope, that's probably not.
I feel like in most cases, it's just one of those things that happens.
Yeah.
That people will, like Critical Role, they didn't get together and say like, they didn't say we want an even gender split. but we also don't want any people of color. Nah, it was just a group of friends
Yeah,
that
exactly.
started doing a show together, and that was just how it worked out.
Like our actual play, the four of us in the DM, it's me, my husband, my best friend, and her husband, and we just all happen to be white. And then it wasn't intentional, but we reached out to our friend Ryan. And we're like, hey, we want to do this thing, and we were talking about playing a game with him anyway, and he just happens to be black. It was never like, oh, we need a black person. It was just, hey, Ryan, you're a good storyteller. Do you want to play in this game with us? And Greg was going to DM originally, and Ryan's like, I have this cool idea. Can I run it by you? And we're like, yeah, sure. And then Clearlight was born. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But when I was putting together it hasn't come out yet because we haven't officially recorded, but when I was going to put together a sci-fi podcast together, I actively was like, I want to make sure that we have that diversity, because I'm playing with people who aren't like my best friends that I've known. Like, I've known my best friend for 23 years. I've known my husband for 9 years. It's like, I want to play with people outside of that group, but I want to make sure I have that diversity, because I'm not just going to pick the closest people that I play with all the time. And it was difficult at first because, like, I had to I always hate turning people away. I'm one of those people that will end up with 14 people at the table because I don't want to turn people away, and that's too much.
Oh no,
It's too much.
It's way too much.
So I had to be a little bit more picky, and I think the group that I came up with that show that we're going to have is going to go really well together, but it also shows that, like, we're trying, like, we're actively trying to be the change that we want to see for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think it's just great to have a variety of frames of reference and experiences.
Yeah,
I think all it does is make your game richer.
exactly. And I think it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see the game because that one is specifically sci-fi, and I think we're doing Savage Worlds. And
what's Savage Worlds?
Savage Worlds is so the game concept uses all the dice just like D&D does, but as you improve the stat, you use bigger dice. So D4, D6, D8, D10, D12.
Okay.
And you can do almost any genre with Savage Worlds. So where D&D is more likely strictly fantasy, yes, there are supplements that are not associated with Wizard of the Coast that go more sci-fi or modern. This one can go literally almost anywhere. They have a Western one, which we've played called Deadlands. They have a high school one, like that's kind of Buffy-esque vibe, called East Texas University, or it might have been University, based off the name. They have sci-fi ones, which is what we're using for, like, where they have actual alien races and species, and they have different classes like that. And then you can also just go fantasy. But there's so many different types of styles that you can play with it that it's very, very easy to do a sci-fi.
Yeah, really versatile.
Yeah. We were looking at Starfinder, which is just Pathfinder but in space, which I love that system, but it's very convoluted. And then we were also looking at, there was a 5th edition one, but I was specifically trying to get away from 5th edition. What was it called? Crap, what is it called? I'm blanking right now. There was a 5th edition supplement that somebody created recently that was it called Dead Space? Was that what it was called? I have to look it up.
I don't know it.
I will have to look it up. 5e D&D in space. I'm sure that will bring it up.
In space.
It was not Spelljammer.
By the way, while you're looking this up, I really hope, because as I understand, you are a consumer of Dimension 20 as well.
I am.
How cool would it be if they did a space setting?
That would be
for one of their...
fantastic. I've been paying for Dimension 20 and I have not had a chance to go and watch it recently. But I watched the first episode of the Pirates one they just did. It was so fucking good. I'm just like, I want to watch it more.
I really liked that one, yeah. They've the last couple of seasons, they've moved away from the RP episode, fight episode, RP episode, fight episode format. so that it's a little bit looser. I think maybe if they start doing games live again, then they like specifically when I say live, I mean in person when they have the sets and everything, then they might go back to that format. But both that season and Unsleeping City Chapter 2 have broken away from that format.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really liked the first one I saw was the one with the corn. I keep remembering the corn cuties.
Fantasy High?
Yes.
The Corn Cuties?
And I'm just like, that's the kind of game, that one and Adventure Zone, that kind of made me realize that I don't have to be super serious in my games all the time. Because I like super serious games sometimes, but those were the two games that I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, this is fucking great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, let's see. Okay, before I had ever even interestingly enough, earlier that year, I had talked to this dude that I used to go to university with, and he had mentioned that he played D&D, and I was like, "Oh man, I'd love to play D&D sometime. I've always wanted to play, but I've never had an opportunity." And he was like, "Oh, I don't think we have a spot open in our game." And I was like, "Yeah, and I don't know the rules." He's like, "Well, it'd be a good idea probably to check out this show Critical Role and see, what do you think?" And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." So I went to check out Critical Role, and I made the mistake of starting with the first episode of Campaign 1, where you have like a 9-minute intro where they can't. I think it's even longer than that, but they do the super long intro of all of these characters, and I can't see anybody because I think when they originally live streamed it, they maybe had images, but like the YouTube version that I was watching, the images had to be blurred, I guess, because of like copyright or something. So it was just a blurry screen for like 15 minutes. And I was like a bunch of people I'd never seen before talking. And I was like, what?
Yeah, before they understood editing.
Yeah, but I got slightly sidetracked just now. But essentially, what I meant to say was the first show that I ever really got into was Dimension 20. And I think that's partly because for me, I need more of a balance of comedy and drama. If it's mostly serious, I tend to get kind of bored. Unless it's like, I mean, if it's mostly serious, then the stakes better be high, man. Because otherwise, I'm just like,
I found it. It took me forever, but it's called Dark Matter.
Mm.
And it is a science fiction conversion of 5th edition that unlocks a universe of adventure for your table.
Okay.
It was released by Mage Hand Press, but I think they left Mage Hand Press due to drama. But it was kickstarted last year, which is why I was like, I know it exists. What is it called? I'm just so bad at names.
I'm gonna have to make a list of all the different RPGs that you've mentioned so far on this podcast so that I can start playing them sometime.
Well, if you ever want to play a specific game, I'm always down to have a Beholder to One Shot episode to play them.
Yo, I'm down. That'll be fun.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I made that, was like I wanted to play all the TTRPGs, and now I have to because I made it an every 2-week thing. It's like, aha, I tricked myself into playing more games.
There you go.
But actually, so Dimension 20 was, I don't remember specifically if I watched Critical Role first or Dimension 20 first. I think I watched Dimension 20 first as well. And then I watched Critical Role, so I got distracted and had to get caught up on Critical Role. But I completely agree, the beginning was rough. It was very rough. And now it's like so much better, but obviously time, experience, money has all come into that, and hiring other people to do those things.
Yeah, also true. And the players mostly know the rules now.
Mostly.
It's better than when they had just switched over from Pathfinder to 5e and having to convert everything, and Matt was still trying to learn the rules and everything.
It is much better. That is true. But what's funny is when I started listening to Taz, I at first thought I would hate it because I don't mean to be, but I sometimes can be a little rules lawyery, and I always let the DM make final decision, even if I don't agree with it. But I like to know how the rules work. So if I don't know and the DM makes a ruling, I will say, okay, and then I'll go look it up to make sure I'm understanding. So going forward, I understand how to play. And that was the first time I saw a game that was like, hey, this can be fun if you don't know all the rules. and it's okay.
Yeah.
Though at first I was very cringed all the time when they were doing the 5th edition rules, and they're like, oh, I'm healing word 1d8 plus like 8. And I'm like, the fuck? What do you mean plus 8? And I'm like getting mad at the game. And then I'm like, yeah, it's not worth it. It's funny. They're having fun. It's okay. It took me a couple episodes, but I'm like, it's okay. Just let them have fun.
Yeah.
And then now I'm just like, this is amazing.
You have to just calm your inner rules lawyer down, like give them a blanket and the lollipop and just
like,
okay, just sit
go
here
in the
for a moment.
corner,
It's gonna be okay.
drink your hot cocoa and rum shata. It's okay.
Yeah, I think the rules aspect of the rules light version of the adventure zone didn't really bother me as much, but I think after a certain point it changed the feel of the show. I've only listened to the balance arc, I should
Okay.
say. I've listened to all of the balance arc, and I think the fact that there was such a de-emphasis on the rules made it feel like the stakes started to drop, because it seemed like, especially once they revealed that they fudged rolls, which, look, as far as I'm concerned, they are more than entitled to run their game the way that they want to run it, and they are all clearly having a blast playing that game. But for me, the framework of the rules helps to introduce the possibility of failure.
Yeah.
Because when the dice rolls are taken seriously, and when you can allow the story to be shaped by the mishaps and the craziness that players sometimes do, rather than trying to stay a bit closer to the plans that the DM may have had, I think that's when you can end up with some really special stuff. At least for me, as speaking as a DM, I think my favorite plot twists that have ever occurred in my games were the result of players doing something that I could never have predicted, and me being like, cool, let's go with that. And now I yes and them, and suddenly this world and these characters have gone, a month or two later, to a place that I could never have imagined, and the story is way more interesting than I would have had it be otherwise. Which is not to say that Taz was not interesting, but I think it started to sound kind of like a radio drama to me after a while, rather than an actual D&D game.
Yeah, I think that's where my disconnect was at first. When I started to think of it as just a humorous show versus a game, I enjoyed it way more.
Yeah.
As a person playing, I would have hated it. If I was going in saying we're playing D&D, then I would have been like, what do you mean I'm faking a 20? Like, I didn't roll a 20. I rolled a 2. Like, come on. But as a listener, exactly what you said, if it was a radio drama. So I think that was the disconnect for me, was like, as soon as I started like, okay, this is funny, I'm listening to it because I'm just ignoring that they're playing D&D. And then I personally enjoy their newer games a little bit more. I haven't listened to their newest one.
Is that Graduation is the current one that they're doing?
Yes, I think so. I think I'm on Amnesty, maybe?
Amnesty was the second big one that they did?
It says campaign 3, but I think
they did like some shorter ones though, didn't they?
Yeah.
They had like Balance as the first huge one, and then they had at least one or two short ones, and then they had another.
Yeah, you're right. This is their second big one. Yeah.
Okay.
So that wasn't using D&D rules though. That was using Monster of the Week rules, or if it wasn't Monster of the Week, it was like a similar Power by the Apocalypse type rule set, which is a fun system, and it's very RP focused, which is what they are as people and players. So I think that worked so much better for them, and I really enjoyed Amnesty. I liked the overall story for the balance arc, and it was funny and it was humorous, but I didn't like the D&D aspect of it.
Right.
But Amnesty,
well, neither did they, to hear them talk about it.
Yeah, true, exactly. But at least they recognized that. So, and they went to what they wanted to play. Because if they would have kept playing D&D like some people wanted them to, because I think they got a lot of kickback when they switched, which I mean, every big show gets kickback for everything, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, how dare you change the intro song? I'm so accustomed to that intro song. I don't care if you'll be sued every time you play it.
Yeah, like, as I feel like people who get really, really angry at shows for changing things that are ultimately not as important, like them playing D&D versus another system, I feel like is less important than the interplay between that group of people. Like that's the appeal of the show, is that group of people in that room telling a story together. But if they're changing other stuff, I feel like if you don't make stuff yourself, a lot of times people can be very overly critical. Like, well, how dare you change this thing? When it's like, dude, the people creating it want to have a good time and make the best thing that they can make.
Exactly.
So they're gonna make changes to try and adjust, according to their own tastes or what works best for them.
If you don't have fun doing it, then it shows. Like I can straight up
Oh.
say that just from my own personal experience with this own podcast. Like you can tell the difference between the beginning of last year and the end of last year. And
Oh, dang.
it had a lot to do with who I was recording with, but like you can tell. At least I can tell. I don't know how many other people can tell, but I quit. I did quit for like 2 months. And I didn't post anything. I almost let the podcast die, and then I would have never met any of the wonderful people that I know now. So
we wouldn't be here right
we would
now
not.
talking about anything that comes into our minds.
But it's funny because like I let that I need to keep this going get in the way of the fun and the whole reason of starting the podcast. And so if you're listening out there and you're a podcast runner, please put yourself first and the fun first and don't overdo it.
Amen. I actually have a question about something that we had just talked about a little bit earlier. I'm curious for you, because you said that Taz and D20 were kind of the first shows to show you just how ridiculous and fun, like silly D&D could be, and funny D&D specifically, I think was what you had said, versus the more serious games like Critical Role, which can get funny, but overall tends to take itself more seriously than either of those shows. What would you say as a player is the difference for you playing in a slightly more comedy-driven game versus, or I guess just a more comedy-driven game versus a more serious game?
So for more serious games, it's you're staying on track. You have your goals. You have to take notes and ensure that you're like completing the tasks put in front of you. Where some comedy games can do that, but I'm in one game specifically right now that is more humorous. Like we joke around the entire time, and it's a great game. I love it. I have a lot of fun. I don't know what the fuck's going on half the time because I'm just like goofing, and it's not, to me, it's not like I have overarching ideas, but like in the moment, I tend to forget, what are we actually here for? Who are we meeting with? What is happening? But like in other games, like the whole Clearlight, which has funny moments, but is more serious aspect and like horror-esque and survival, and like you can die at any freaking moment because Brian keeps throwing shit at us. Though that game, while I enjoy it significantly, I have to be on my toes. I have to be aware of my surroundings and character. And then also because it's recorded, you're also being hyper vigilant of like, are you acting it out appropriately? Are you, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I've also played like super serious games where like any type of action could get you killed. Like if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, even accidentally, it could get you killed. So I like the in-between ones. Like the super serious games are fun every once in a while. The super fun games are great de-stressors. Like the other day, one Friday when I was just having a really bad day, I literally was like, I need a Monty Python type of game night. Can we please just goof around? Like I cannot have a serious game night tonight. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. And we goofed the entire time and it was fantastic. Like in that game,
that does sound like a blast.
Our Warforged could get an augment that let him have a bag of holding in his stomach. And he's like, can I put it anywhere on my body? So now he has an ass of holding.
As soon as you said anywhere in my body,
Yep.
I was like, I ran through a couple locations and I was like, this is going in the posterior.
Yep. And we still think it's fucking hilarious because evidently we're like 12 and we're like, look what I can do. And I'm like, I pull a sword out of his ass. And we're like, what? Like, I don't know. Don't ask questions.
Hey man, I think it's funny. And second of all, as long as you're having fun.
Exactly. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. So like there's days where I'm like, I want a super serious game. My Monday game, I'm like, I want a serious game. I want to DM a serious game, low magic, high RP, like let's do this. You can have fun moments. You can obviously I want you all to have fun, but you're surviving. Like this is a survival game. You need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
This isn't a I can do whatever I want and convince the T-Rex to be my friend type of game like my previous game. But yeah.
I think for me, what has continued to draw me to Dimension 20 is that balance that you're talking about, because I know it has a reputation for being a mostly comedy show, but
It has a ton
I
of
haven't
serious
watched,
moments.
but it goes hard.
Mhm.
Like when it gets serious, it gets very serious. Like, have you seen A Crown of Candy?
I don't think I've seen that one yet.
Okay, that one it's the premise is basically Game of Thrones meets Candyland.
I think I watched like part of the first episode and then like got distracted at work or something.
Okay, well, let me tell you, they do not pull punches on the Game of Thrones comparison. And that is all I will say about that. I will say in terms of like objectionable content, they don't have like D20 doesn't really do stuff like that, but in terms of just straight up drama and like putting you through the emotional ringer and putting the players through the emotional ringer.
Yeah.
There's one point in one of the episodes where I think half the people in the room are crying, including Brennan.
Yeah.
Like, it goes hard. And see, but the thing is, it can also be like screamingly funny. And I think that's what I like. It's like that Tarantino type balance.
Yeah.
Where in his movies, you'll have like most of it's really, really funny. And then when it gets dramatic, it goes suddenly like, whoa. And it's now like the tensest thing that you've ever been in. That's what I enjoy. And that's also what I enjoy, I think, in the games that I run. Where when it's silly, it's really silly, and the baseline is like, and a lot of silliness can happen. But then when stuff gets serious, it's like, okay, like this could really go bad.
Yeah, as long as everybody's on the same page, then it's great.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
So there's nothing worse than like everybody being super serious and like one person is making snide jokes in the background. You're like, no, we're trying to be fucking serious right now. Calm down.
My character's name is Bert Fart Reynolds.
Yeah, not right now, Bert. Shut up.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that from the Fantasy High one specifically too. Like the characters all had these like deep stories that were super serious. Some or most of them, if I recall correctly, were super serious. And was that hold on, I could be mixing up my stories because I'm really, really bad at it. The one with the Divination Wizard?
Yeah, that's Fantasy High.
Okay. Like her thing, she experienced anxiety attacks in character and like they got super serious in the moment and like got down on her level and like spoke to her as a teacher to teacher. And then it ended off in a jokey mood too. But it was like there was that moment where it was just like super serious. This is real. This is serious. Like anxiety is real. You are not just imagining it. And as somebody who has anxiety, I felt that moment so hard. And then it ended with like a joke about drugs and like, I can give you something. And it was like back to funny. And then, but like that one moment was just like, oh shit, I've been there. I've been in that character's shoes. So, obviously not completely because something crazy is happening, but having an anxiety attack at the worst opportune moment, feeling like you're a failure. And then you're like, no, you got this. And it's like, shit, why is this hitting me so hard? This is supposed to be funny.
Yeah, it's like I feel like that show did a very good job of capturing the feel of the 80s movies that it was inspired by, stuff like The Breakfast Club, where like most of it you're just like, oh, this is fun, but there'll be moments where, at least for me watching those movies, where I feel it's like it gets real and like really genuinely, like there's the scene where, oh, what's the actor? The nerd who's a really good actor, was in a lot of really good movies from that era. Cannot remember his name. He was on SNL, and he was on an episode of Community too. Actually, maybe in 2 episodes of Community. But the scene where the nerd is like crying because I think it's because like nobody takes him seriously or respects him or something.
Brian Johnson.
And I was just like, man, this hurts.
I think his name was Brian in game, or in the show. I mean,
in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anthony Michael Hall. That's the actor. I just Googled him. Anthony Michael Hall. Yeah, that was rough, but I also really, really liked it. And you're right, it was Brian. Oh, Brian Johnson, lead singer for AC/DC. The same name as the second lead singer for AC/DC, coincidentally. But anyway.
I just Googled Breakfast Club nerd. Came up.
Yeah, I think that movie does a very good job of acknowledging both the ridiculousness of the situation as well as the fact that there are real emotions going on, which I think that's ultimately what Taz ended up doing very well. is that most of it was very, very ridiculous. But there was, even if I didn't feel like there was a genuine sense of peril in the story, there was a very genuine sense of peril, but also a genuine sense of triumph and people learning and growing. And like they got a lot more serious once they start having Magnus like reconnect, or not Magnus, but what was Clint's character's name? Magnus is the fighter who rushes in, and then Clint played the cleric. He was the dwarf cleric.
Yeah, I'm so bad at names. Hold on.
Half this episode is us looking up stuff on Google.
Honestly. Major players. Agnes. Nope. Merle.
Merle. Yes.
Highchurch.
When Merle was like reconnected. Yes. Merle Highchurch reconnecting with his kids. It got like surprisingly dramatic in those scenes. And it was like, oh, dang. And like they actually did have genuine integrity in terms of how they dealt with the characters. Like they actually cared about the characters and their development.
Yes. I like that, those moments. Like I love, and I've always loved and will always love characters that grow. Especially playing as characters that grow, because, and it doesn't even have to just be like growth as a person, becoming a better person per se, but just like changing and growing with the situation. And that could be, I'm an adventurer now, but eventually and retire as a family person. It could be falling in love and having children. It could be falling in love and getting hurt, and it could be never falling in love at all. It doesn't have to involve love, but it's just like I love character growth in arcs and stories like that, because then it feels real, and it's like it's still a story, but like I become emotionally connected to that character's story, and I'm like, I want to see them succeed, or at least if they fail, I want it to be the most epic fail possible, that they've tried their damnedest, they did not give up. And I had to have characters leave because of that same reason. Like the characters, I don't force characters to stay in a situation that they wouldn't have stayed in, which is hard in some situations. But like I've literally retired characters or had them leave a game and had to make a new character because of the way they are being treated by other PCs at the table.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, my character, literally, like, it's the whole, like, I hate the saying it's what my character would do, but I was getting so mad at the PC that my character was about to kill them in character. Because that's how mad I was getting. They kept pulling pranks on her. It was a catfolk. This was a Pathfinder game. She was a catfolk, which is like a tabaxi. And they went out to like eat one day, and he ordered cat on the menu, and then like rubbed it in her face or something like that. So she went like on a mission to save all the cats in the kitchen. And then later, because the DM would like roll random tables. So later we found a lion's skin. It was just like randomly on their generated list. So he put it on and pretended to be her dead ancestor.
Oh.
And he just kept doing shit like that. And it was all like pranks to him, but it just kept going for weeks and weeks and weeks in game.
Oh.
So finally I told the DM, I'm like, my character is a rogue. She can kill him and he would never know that nobody would ever know that she was in his room, because that's what she's good at. She's an assassin. I don't want to be that person. And my character wouldn't want to kill somebody that she has trusted and worked with this entire time. So I'm going to have her retire or at least leave. And she left a note in his bed with a knife stabbed next to it on his when he was sleeping, with saying like, this was your final warning.
Oh, dang.
I'm done with your pranks. They're not pranks. They're hurtful. I'm taking my child, which we adopted a half shadowling character that they rescued, and she adopted him. It's like, I'm taking my child and we are leaving. I've already told them that you need backup. And she left. And then I had to bring a new character in, which sucked because I loved that character so much. But like,
did you ever bring her back?
No, I think I left the game before I ever brought her back.
Oh, that's a shame. Did your new character receive the same kind of treatment?
No, she was not a tabaxi catfolk.
Oh, so did this other character just hate cats?
I think he was just being a dick and thinking it was funny.
Oh, wow.
But the new character was like super serious, and they didn't have that rapport going on. So it never got to that point where he pulled pranks. And when he did, she just walked away, because I didn't want it to get to that point.
Yeah.
So I never gave it the opportunity. And then I think I left like 2 months later in game, or out of game, for other reasons.
Okay.
But it sucked because that character was such a fun character.
Do you ever bring back characters from one game and like bring them into another game?
I have not. I could,
Hmm.
but it feels weird to me. It feels like taking like to me it feels like, oh, I love the Dresden Files, and it feels like taking Harry Dresden out and then putting him in a different series completely. It would just feel strange. It could work.
Yeah.
I could make it work, but
Well, because he was created for that
yeah.
world.
So it feels off.
Yeah.
If they don't have a lot of background and history, then I can do it without. I have done similar character, like the same picture or like the same concept, but just a different class. I've done that before, but I always change their name and their classes and like tweak it a little bit like that. But like I found a picture I loved, and I'm like, this is a perfect character. Played her as a wizard, and then switched her to a cleric, I think, for another game.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Yeah, I think the only time that well, no, there's a few of my characters that I've wanted to say I'd like to bring this person back in like a future game because I felt like there was like an aspect of their character or backstory that didn't get fully explored in this particular game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if it's like a long running game where, we play for like months and months, then I'm less likely to want to do that because I think the longer we play, the more that character feels native to that world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my Vidalcan druid for Dragon Heist. I love that character. She's one of my favorite characters that I've ever played. I could not see her in any
Mhm.
game other than Dragon Heist. I just
What if you guys did the sequel?
Oh, if we did the
Would you
sequel,
cuz
she's coming back. Because
okay.
I would because it would fit the story. Because we ended that campaign with her going off for 2 to 5 years. Like everybody did their thing for 2 to 5 years, and we're gonna come back and
Okay.
supposed to do the sequel, but it might be a while until we see that day. And I'm just like, oh, I miss her so much.
Oh, well, I hope you get to play her again.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of another question, or it makes me think of another question. I guess I didn't forget the question, but it makes me think of another question, which is, do you prefer playing in published modules, or do you prefer playing in homebrew campaigns?
If the DM is good at allowing roleplay and not staying hyper focused on like the story, modules are fine. Homebrew is my preference for DMing specifically, but I have played in some amazing modules that didn't feel like modules. And we could still, as long as roleplay was allowed and like encouraged, then it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell a difference. The Dragon Heist game was super roleplay heavy. It took us like 2 fucking years to hit level 6
Whoa.
because we roleplayed so much and focused on the
Oh,
tavern.
wow. Yeah. That is a lot of RP.
Yeah.
Were so when you create characters for modules, I guess it depends on the DM to some degree,
Mhm.
but do you because for me, my difficulty with modules is often that I'll create like this. It's not super elaborate backstory. It's not like some 5-page backstory. It'll be a half page to a page, but there will be a lot of interesting stuff there to play with theoretically. Like I'll try and I made a character as an example. I made a character who had used to he was a gnome artificer who wanted he believed that biomagical augmentation was the future, and he wanted to develop magical technology that would enhance people's lives by enhancing their bodies.
Mhm.
And so he joined I guess we use the Simic Combine because I know very little about Magic the Gathering or Ravnica.
Mhm.
I just was looking for like a corporation that he could have joined, and thinking that they were, these people they experiment with magic and its effects on people and creating different things for people. But what he didn't realize when he first took the job was that they're creating monsters. And he, after working with them, became ashamed of the creations that they were working for and became horrified and set a bunch of the creatures free and then fled. And his goal is to find those creatures and basically give them a better life and rehabilitate them and help maybe them integrate in society and maybe try and undo some of the damage that was done to them. not like the most elaborate backstory, but like it gives yeah, and it gives the character an immediate goal, and it gives the character principles as well, and a history. And for me, one thing that was dissatisfying about the campaign that I played him in was that backstory was almost it went almost entirely unincorporated into the game. So it basically has even his mission has no bearing on what's happening now. So my question to you is, does that ever happen for you, where you will create a backstory that greatly informs the character? And I would imagine it's easier for that kind of backstory to be incorporated in a homebrew campaign versus a pre-written module. But what is your experience in that area, I guess, is the best way of phrasing it.
So in a campaign setting for the character I just was talking about, I didn't have a backstory for her at all. She grew as we grew as players. I knew she was a hippie. I knew she was a weaver and that she liked to get high a lot. And like that was the extent of my knowledge with her when I built her. And then I kind of just increased her and made her and improved her the way I wanted her to be as the story grew. And that worked for that story. I will say for my Friday game, we are doing a module of Eberron.
Okay.
And I honestly, I guess my DM told me that it was a module at some point, and I forgot promptly that it was a module because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like a homebrew setting. And in that setting, I did have a background and a backstory. My character is a monk. She is a fighter through and through. She's very stubborn and very naive about all things adult-esque, and I just go with it. But she pissed off the Boromar, which is a halfling crime mafia-ish family kind of thing in Eberron. And she pissed them off by telling them that she would purposefully lose a fight so that because she had a high win rate. So if she lost, they would win a lot of money. She said she would do it. So they bet all this money against her. And then she didn't because she got stubborn. So they went after her, and then because they couldn't find her, they went after her family.
Oh.
So the whole story arc is focused on the module, but there's little pieces that fall in whenever we meet, like the DM will add the Boromar into it, and my character has this hatred for the Boromar specifically, where she goes into like almost a rage to just destroy them because they threatened her family, and her family is like in hiding right now. So her ultimate goal is to like kill all of the Boromar, or at least usurp them, to make it so that they can't hurt her family and they can come back. But none of that's in the module. And then each of the other two characters in the game, they also have their own personal things that they're trying to figure out that all aren't in the module. And there's been things that weren't a part of our story that became part of our stories, like silly things like the sweet cake lady out on the sidewalk. Every morning when we woke up from a tavern, we're like, I want sweet cakes. We go outside, we buy 20 gold worth of sweet cakes. We ended up giving her so much money she could buy a house, which led to a side arc that wasn't part of the module either. And now like she's the adoptive grandmother of the 3 orphans we rescued from another part that wasn't with the module. So it's like,
oh wow,
it's all become part of the story, even though that was never part of the actual part. And those are the things I love.
Okay, so the DM has done an amazing job of incorporating player choices into the pre-written module.
Yes, exactly. And in the homebrew setting, I've played games where I had some idea of a background. Specifically, this was in Shadowrun, where I still, like 5 years later, talk about the story and the heartbreak that happened in the story about this girl falling for a woman, my gnome Decker falling in love with the woman behind the counter of a shop, and that turned out to be the daughter of the Irish mafia leader, which led to a mafia war ultimately. And it was just like,
oh,
the fuck.
Yeah, see, I feel like that is the kind of thing that makes role-playing games so special.
Yes.
Especially TTRPGs, even compared to the overwhelming majority of video games, because it's that freedom and the ability to create your own experiences, which you just don't get in the vast majority of other games.
Exactly. Like those are the type of things that I love. And I'm also the type of person that will play games with like, I like starting families in games. Like, I don't know why I
Mm.
do, but I've played a game where we had to literally make up our own rules for what would happen if a mage, which was a race for this particular game, it was a homebrew game, but a mage and a dragon-like person had babies. What would happen?
Ha.
And both have their own types of magic and their own races. What's the likelihood? And like, we rolled for everything and ended up with like 7 eggs that gave birth to like half mage, half dragon. And it was just like such a fun game.
Whoa. You had a full clutch.
We did.
You had a full. That's amazing.
And then we were
Yeah,
supposed to
see,
play them later, like 8 years later.
That's that's exactly the kind of stuff. Like it makes the game, it makes this campaign yours.
Mm-hmm.
And that I used to run a campaign, it recently ended, in which one of the PCs had married an NPC, and she was 3/4 gnome, 1/4 human.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think she was half forest gnome, 1/4 rock gnome, and then 1/4 human. And then her husband was a shifter, but also a tiefling. And they had triplets. And
I love it.
now I think according to official D&D lore, I think if you're a tiefling and you have kids, they also become tieflings, I think. But in no matter, we were playing fast and loose with that. And yeah, I had to create like a full genetic system and have her roll to see how, like, what genetic combo each of these kids were going to be.
Have you seen the book An Elf and an Orc Have a Little Baby?
No, I have not.
I would suggest it then, if those are the type of things you like in your games, because it was a supplement that's in DMs on the DMs Guild that allows you to literally make like the past 3 generations and use the stats of your generations to determine what your stats are going to be with any mix of race whatsoever. And your attribute bonuses are based off your living surroundings and not your race.
Oh.
So you could just do like, I'm going to be a half Aarakocra and half Furbolg and have a race right there. Or you can be a little bit more picky, or you can make your 3 generations and pick from those stats. And then based off wherever your character was growing up determines their attribute bonus. So if they were like raised in a very fast-paced environment, they're going to be a little bit more nimble, so higher dexterity. If they're raised in a environment that intelligence was key, even if they're a half orc, they'll get +2 to intelligence. And it was all based off that. And I absolutely love the fucking concept.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, it sounds like it circumvents a lot of D&D's race problems, what with some of those negative ability score bonuses and everything they've tried to sort of patch out with Tasha's.
Yeah.
That sounds, and it just adds a level of flexibility that you would normally never have. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'll let you look at it if you want, and then you can decide if you want to get it. But I made for my game that I'm running on Mondays, I have a half wood elf / half forest gnome as one of the characters. So they're like taller than normal gnomes are, but have some elven features, and you pick your age and height and race all based off age and height and abilities all based off the races you pick.
Okay. We on Three Black Halflings had interviewed, actually, speaking of Dimension 20, we interviewed Brennan Lee Mulligan, the DM. Yeah, okay, so
I'm so jealous.
that reminds that reminds me of his idea of not really having races have any mechanical bearing on your character and having it all tied to class. And then just have a list of feats, I think, that you can choose from. I think that was what he had said.
That sounds cool.
Like different features. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and it also just allows for more flexibility in general.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense I like games that allow you to like pick and choose, but on the opposite side, I know it's usually used to like make an OP character. Like, people will min-max the shit out of it and just give them like pick the best stats. Like, I know people are going to use it for that, and that upsets me a little bit. But I love using those things that for role play sense, that makes sense for the story, for that character's growth and environments. And it's not just with race, but like with class too. I played a ranger, Avon Ranger. Avon is from Wizard of the Coast, never officially published them as books, but there was a bunch of PDFs released that were related to Magic the Gathering. And Amoket was one of them. And Avon is a race from Magic the Gathering's Amoket set. And it's a...
Okay, yeah, I've heard of the Amonkhet stuff. That I think I've even looked at it, that they had released.
Yeah.
Or that it had been released for D&D.
Yeah. So it's technically out there. It's not official, I don't think. And Avon's a little busted, so that makes complete sense why it's not official. But I played an Avon Sunhawk Ranger, which gave me 600 feet range without disadvantage because of the race ability, which is ridiculous and shouldn't be allowed at any point.
Whoa.
But as she was a ranger, she was on a quest and she got killed. And in the server I was playing, as a play-by-post server, you could be resurrected. So we had a church offer to resurrect her. She was dead. She didn't have a say in this matter. But one of the players agreed for her that if they resurrected him, because he was a ghost at the time, and myself, we would serve the church for 6 months in payment. So she is resurrected, and basically I was forced to take a level in cleric, which I could have technically avoided. Like, I could have done it, said, okay, cool, thanks, and then respect my character because they had that option. But I refused to because in the story, it made sense. There was a complete reason to do it. Even if I didn't want a level in cleric, it made no sense for the character. She wasn't religious in any form of way. But I used that story because she leveled up twice in that quest and we level up at the end. It made sense for her to also then take rogue because she learned how to sneak out better from the church so that she could get away from them because she didn't want to be there. So she became better at being a rogue and being sneaky. So I took rogue after a level in cleric. And I refused to get rid of the level of cleric, even though it was pointless. And I never used anything from it because it just made thematical sense.
Yeah, exactly. You were letting the character that you had created dictate your mechanical choices.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I like about the stories.
Yeah. I think the stronger the character, the more emotionally impactful the various things. First of all, the stronger the character, the more emotionally invested I think the player is, and then the more emotionally impactful anything that happens is going to be.
Right. 100%. Well, it has been almost an hour and a half already. So.
Goodness me.
Yeah, we've just been talking away and it's been wonderful. I've had fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we mentioned a little bit, but tell us where everybody can go and find you.
All right. Well, I am 1/3 of a podcast called Three Black Halflings. You can find us wherever pods are cast. You can, if you want to follow us on social media, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. In all three cases, it's TB Halflings, or I guess in the case of Instagram and Twitter, at TB Halflings. And we also have a Patreon, which is TB Halflings. And oh my, we actually stream every other week on Twitch. We have an ongoing campaign in an Africa-based setting called Wagadu that was created by a group called Twin Drums. The basic premise of the setting is, what if J.R.R. Tolkien was African instead of European, and he drew from various African mythologies instead of various European mythologies to create the world of Middle-earth. And in this particular setting, it's called Wagadu. It's an absolute blast. We are having, last week, we had a special guest on our Wagadu stream, none other than, speaking of Dimension 20, Lou Wilson.
Yay.
From Dimension 20, already guest starred on our Wagadu Chronicles. We do on our show, I should say, because I haven't said anything about the podcast, we do interviews with various people. We talk amongst ourselves about a variety of topics. We basically discuss issues of diversity in D&D and fantasy. We talk about DMing tips, different approaches to the game, different recent news items in the community, so on and so forth. And we have our main actual play show is the Wagadu setting, but although we do have, it's called the Wagadu game is called the Cub and the Caterpillar, a Wagadu Tale, and it's actually, I forgot to mention, the official actual play podcast of the Wagadu setting. We announced our partnership with Twin Drums the end of last year.
So much excitement.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, folks. Come and check us out. Check out some eps. We have, as I said, we've interviewed Brennan Lee Mulligan. We've interviewed actually a bunch of Dimension 20 alumni. We've interviewed Lou Wilson. We've interviewed Bria Iyengar, Christina Ariel, Zach Oyama recently. We have interviews with people who aren't from Dimension 20. We were also on Dragon Talk, the official Wizards of the Coast D&D podcast. You can find, I was on there once before, interviewed, I think it was just me and Shelly, and then there's one with all three halflings. Much of those interviews are on YouTube. Yeah, go check us out, and if you like us, feel free to toss us some muns on Patreon. We would very appreciate it. And even if you don't want to, we appreciate you checking out.
It is a wonderful show. I absolutely loved the episode with Lou Wilson that you had recently. That was such a good episode.
Thank you. That was, I've got to say, that was I would say it was a dream come true, but I never dreamed that we would actually get him onto the podcast. So it was just a surreal experience.
Understandable. Well, thank you again. And you can check us out on Twitter at Beholder to No One or Facebook at Beholder to No One, but I am much more active on Twitter. Find us wherever podcasts can be found. Please check out our Thursday episodes. We either have our actual play, a horror-esque 5th edition homebrew setting DM'd by Ryan, or on the off weeks, you can find our Beholder 2 one-shot where we try a bunch of different tabletop games that aren't D&D related. So if you aren't into discussions, well, thanks for listening to this episode. And if you are into discussions, we have about 30 other episodes of discussions that you can listen to. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.